So let's dive into the heist that occurred at the Swedish National Museum. Tell me what happened on December 22nd, 2000.
Well, on December 22nd, 2000, three individuals just went into the museum. It was late in the afternoon, after 5 o'clock. You got to remember now, this is Stockholm, Sweden, so it's dark, it's cold. People are out shopping in the middle of town. The museum's on the outskirts of town, right on the water. So these three individuals went into the front doors, and they had machine guns. And as they went in, they put everybody on the floor. They made everybody lay down. Two of these individuals then ran around the museum, and they were stealing three artworks, while the third person stood over guard with the guns. There was very few people in there. You could imagine at that point in time, that late in the day, not many people at all. So these two guys, they went around, they stole two Renoir paintings, and a Rembrandt self-portrait. The total value of the heist that night was $42 million. It's the largest art crime in Swedish national history. Actually, it's probably the largest property crime in Swedish national history. So they had to make their getaway. And of course, as I said, the museum is right on the pier at the water in the harbor in Stockholm. So what they did was they set off two car bombs in the city. And what that did is stop the responders from getting to the museum. It took them 40 minutes for the police and fire department to get to the museum. Set down two tack strips on the main roads. So any cars that got by would lose their tires. And then they made their getaway. But how'd they do that? They couldn't go back into the city. They had parked a high-speed boat right at the pier at the museum. So they could run out to the boat. They jumped in, and all three of them made their getaway. So it was a pretty good heist. They had tack strips. They had car bombs to stop the police. They had machine guns, and they had a high-speed boat that they used as a getaway. So it looked pretty good. 42 million, three paintings, two by Renoir and the Rembrandt. And it looked like they're going to get away with this. But there was one problem. At one point, they pulled over, jumped off the boats, and ran up into the city at the number of steps. They didn't notice a fellow sitting over by the other side of the water. He was fishing. And he saw these guys jump out of their boats and run up into the harbor. And he thought that looked suspicious, but didn't think much more about it. The next day, of course, he reads about this huge heist in the Swedish newspapers. And he calls the police, this local police. He says, I saw these three guys jumping out of their boat last night, running up into the city. It was kind of strange to me. So the police said, okay, well, where were they? And he tells them the location, and gives them the number off of the boat. Does he ever written it down? Well, of course, the police go and they find the boat still sitting there at the pier. They run the numbers. They find out who was the owner, and they go investigate that. They go talk to the owner. And they find out, the owner says, yeah, he says, that was my boat, but I sold it about a month ago. So the police are very disappointed at that point. They're thinking, we missed out on a good lead here. And as they're walking out the door, leaving, the owner of the boat says to them, hey, well, wait a minute, I got one thing. And they said, what? And he says, I have their credit card number. Yeah, I know. They bought the boat with a credit card.
Oh, my gosh.
And look, if they were really all that smart, we'd never catch them. Okay. But there's always something that comes up. So, of course, they got the credit card number. They traced that back, and they were able to actually indict in Stockholm 10 people that they believe were involved in this heist. At that point, they also recovered one of the Renoirs, worth about $4 million. They went to trial. 7 out of the 10 were convicted, but that left 3 out there that were acquitted at that point as not being involved. So they got 10-year sentences because of the gun and the theft, and that was the end of the story for the next 4 years. So remember, this happened in 2000. The trials were over in 2001. Then 4 years later, nothing else has happened. No other recoveries, no one word about the paintings. There's still a Renoir out there and the $35 million Rembrandt. So I started to team up, and I get a call from our agent in California, and his name's Chris. Chris calls me and says, Bob, have you ever heard of a Renoir that was stolen in a heist safe from a museum in Stockholm? And I said, yeah, there was a big heist about 5 years ago. It was, it was a couple of Renoirs and a Rembrandt. So what's going on? He said, well, we've been doing this drug investigation here in LA, and we've got this Bulgarian drug dealer named Boris. And Boris is already involved in a 2 key drug deal. So we've got him on a 10-year stint once we arrest him. I said, well, that's great. I said, well, what about it? And he said, well, he's been talking about selling the second Renoir. Remember, there was 2 stolen. We got 1 back. Now he's talking about selling the second one. Somehow he has custody of it. So I said to Chris, I said, look, that would be great. We have a brand new team. If we could recover that Renoir, it would be great for the team to get us started. He said, okay, I'll let you know what's going on. So he goes back. About 2 weeks later, I get a call, and he says, great news. We've recovered the second Renoir. It was called La Parisienne. So we took it to the Getty, and the curators at the Getty said it's the legitimate painting. So that was the good Renoir, worth $4 million also. So we got that back. So, of course, I said to Chris next, I said, what are you going to do next? He said, well, the special agent in charge wants to have a press conference on Monday. I said, well, before you do that, go back to Boris, your Bulgarian drug dealer, who has the Renoir, and ask him about the Rembrandt. I mean, that's the big painting. It's worth $35 million. Where, does he know where that is? So he goes back, and he calls me back and says, yeah, Boris knows. It's still in Stockholm, and Boris can introduce us to the individuals who have the Rembrandt. I said, okay, great. So at that point, we started an undercover called Operation Bullwinkle. And the reason we called it Bullwinkle is because we had Boris the Bulgarian. Of course, we didn't have a Rocky the Squirrel or the Moose. We had Boris the Bulgarian. But now you know how the FBI names these operations, right? I thought the best one I ever heard was Operation Bullpen. And that was about a group of people who were selling fake sports memorabilia, autographs. Yeah. Bull and pen,
I love it. That's perfect.
Yeah, that was pretty. Anyway, so we had Operation Bullwinkle. And what that was an undercover operation to go to Sweden, meet with the criminals that still had the painting, and make a deal to try to buy the painting from them and do a buy bust. My operation on that was to be the undercover. So I was acting as an authenticator and professor for the Russian mob. And my deal was to buy the painting, make sure it's real, and do the deal. So we flew to Stockholm, Sweden. We met with the Swedish National Police. We met with the prosecutors. And basically they said that we could not do this there because Boris, our Bulgarian drug dealer, had an arrest warrant in Sweden. They wouldn't let him in the country to introduce me. So we did the next best thing. We created the operation in Copenhagen, Denmark. It's about a 5-hour train ride from Stockholm. The reason we did that is because the FBI agents were geographically challenged. We could have gone right to Norway, which was right there, right from. But no, they had to go to Copenhagen and go 5 hours on a train to get there back and forth, So anyway, so we set the operation up in Copenhagen, where I flew to Copenhagen, got a room at the Scandic Hotel, and I started meetings with these individuals. Boris introduced me to these 3 individuals who were in custody of the painting. We negotiated for about 2.5 weeks after many, many months of conversations on the phone. And finally, they agreed to do this deal with me for $250,000 cash. Think about that. $35 million painting, they're going to sell it to me for $250,000 in cash. So now everybody knows what that painting's worth, right? $250,000. But here's the thing. You have to remember, they had no money in it. There's no cost basis. So that $250,000 was all profit. And that's what they wanted. So I said, okay. So I had the $250,000 shipped over to me in $100 bills. We put it in a briefcase and waited for them. Finally, they agreed. I said, go home, get the painting, bring it back. So they left. They went back to Stockholm. Next morning, I get a call from the Swedish National Police. They say, everything's good. The painting's on the way. All 3 guys have gotten back on a train. There was a lot of movement last night between houses. And they're carrying a package, looks like in a bag, about the size of the painting. So they said to me, should we arrest them? I said, no. I said, wait, let them come. Let's let this happen, And they did. I give them a lot of credit. I mean, if a painting was stolen from the Met in New York City, I doubt that the NYPD would let it go to Canada. I don't think it would happen. But in this case, the Swedes let it come back down to Copenhagen. So all 3 guys get off the train, come walking back towards my hotel, about 5 blocks. One guy with the bag, with the painting, stays outside on the corner. The other 2 guys, they come up to my room, come back to where I was. They come in. I say to them, okay, what's going on? They say, well, we want to see the money. So at that point, I pull out a briefcase. I put $250,000 in cash on the bed. These guys sit on the bed. They count through every stack of $100 bills to make sure it's real, and they're happy. I say, okay, where's the painting? Go get the painting. Remember, I don't know the guys outside. I knew it, but I couldn't let go. Later on that I knew. They said, okay, we'll be back. So they leave. I'm sitting there waiting. maybe 7, 8, 10 minutes. I'm thinking, what's going on? I get a call. It's the Swedish police again. They say something went wrong. I said, what happened? They said, well, all three of them ran away. I said, what do you mean they ran away? He said, they ran away. Do you want us to arrest them? I said, no. I said, if they get back on the train, stop them. But wait till they do that. Don't do anything until they get on the train. I hung up. I'm standing there, I'm walking back and forth in this little room thinking, what could I have said wrong? I can't believe it. I want to hear the tapes, because all this is being taped. I want to see what I said. Finally, I get another call. And it's against the Swedish police. They say everything's okay. They had a fourth person come in the night before. That person actually had the painting. And he had a different room in a different hotel. So these three guys, when they came down with that bag, it was just a decoy. If we had stopped them at any point, we would have had nothing. They would have known we were the police. So it was a decoy to do a counter surveillance against us. So they went back, they go to the guy's hotel, they get the painting, and they're on their way back. Now the fourth man's already been arrested. All three are coming back to my hotel. They come up into the room, the two guys again, this time they have the painting. We finally get it opened up. It's in this red velvet cloth. It took forever to open. And I'm looking at it, and it's real. It's the real painting. And the reason I knew was because there was 4 clips in the back of the frame that held the painting in. And these clips were at a certain angle because I had the photographs from the museum. And as a result, I could tell it had never been taken out of the frame. So I said to them, I said, hey, you guys never even took this painting out of the frame, did you? And they looked at me kind of aghast. And they said, of course not. It's a Rembrandt. I said, what are you guys art lovers? And they said, no, we're not art lovers. I said, excuse me. I didn't realize that, you guys were such art lovers. And they just wanted the money, but they knew what they had. They had a Rembrandt, a real Rembrandt. It was done in 1630 when Rembrandt was 24 years old, and it was painted on copper, which at that time was really, really expensive metal. You just didn't waste copper in 1630. It had gold flecks in the paint, and it was one of his first uses of chiaroscuro. Chiaroscuro, I think is shadow in the portrait. So you can see on the side, there was a shadow on his face. It wasn't a full face from a portrait, which is what they used to do. This was a shadow with the chiaroscuro. And that's something that we use today all the time. Portraiture, in photographs, everything. So they pulled the painting out, could tell it was legitimate. So I gave the code word, which was, this is a done deal, and waited for about 20 seconds for the police to finally come in and do the SWAT team thing. It saved me, and saved the painting, and saved everybody. Ultimately, they couldn't get in because the door key that they had didn't work. So I had to go open the door for them while I hid in the bathroom with the painting. When they all ran in, we were able to arrest everybody. So we recovered. It was a $36 million painting all told. In the end, all the paintings were recovered. The thieves never got any money. Ultimately, those 3 guys that were involved in this situation with me, they were the ones that were acquitted. Remember, there was 10 people that were arrested in 2001? Well, 7 were convicted. These 3 actually were involved, but they were acquitted at the time. And now they're going to be prosecuted for having the painting. And the most interesting part, I think, is that Boris, 2 things happened with Boris. First, he got a downward departure in Los Angeles. He went from 10 years in prison to probation for his cooperation in the case. And the second thing was that one of the 3 thieves that we were working with was Boris's son. So in this case, the father gave up his son. So there's no honor among thieves. And it was actually his son who had the Rembrandt. Ultimately, these guys were given 2-year sentences in jail in Sweden. But the European Union courts, they annulled the sentence, saying that the use of the father against his son was a civil rights violation. Now, that wouldn't happen in the United States, but in Europe, that's what they looked at it. But I didn't care about that. What was important was getting that Rembrandt back. And the idea of the recovery, the painting there, was the most important thing as far as I was concerned. These guys, they did 6-8 months in prison, and then other things would happen to them. That's how it works. But I knew that we got our painting back. That case is a great case because it really shows the importance of cultural property protection. It shows how important a Rembrandt is, not just to the Swedish Museum, but to the Danes, to the United States. It's all of us. It's our culture and our history. And when we lose something like that, it affects everyone in the world, not just the owner, but all of us, because it belongs to all of us. And what else one other piece of property. Could you imagine that three countries, Denmark, Sweden, the United States would get involved together to recover? They wouldn't do it for a Chevrolet, but they would do it for a Monet.
It really is a crime against the public. It's a crime against the culture that we all share. That's such a phenomenal story. And I have a few small questions. So you've answered what Boris got in exchange. You've answered that the three individuals I asked, I'd written down, were they Bulgarian? Because one being his son, the answer is yes. So
But he was actually Swedish.
Swedish.
And the two other individuals that were with him were Iranian.
So, and then regarding the Rembrandt, so was it in Stockholm the entire time? It never left Stockholm?
No, it was in a closet for 5 years.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, that's another shame. When somebody steals artwork like that, they can't, basically, it's terrible because you can't do anything with it. I mean, basically, a beating, where are you going to sell it? The criminals are thieves and they are businessmen, because they think they can get away with these things. They can. They do a good job of planning the robbery, but then they can't sell the materials. They're terrible businessmen. And, the real art in an art crime, it isn't the stealing, it's the selling.
How long did they say, or do you surmise that it took to plan the heist? Because it sounded elaborate, right? With the tires, tack strips, and the everything. How long did they say they had planned?
I'd say for a year. They were planning that heist. Yeah, they had one person who was basically he was in prison and he got out, and he met some of these other individuals in prison, and then as a result, they got together and were able to plan this out.
Right. Many people learn how to become criminals in prison, that's for sure. Your story is remarkable to me, too, because it illustrates the power of patience and the final component of the story that if you had authorized those guys to be arrested or captured or whatever, that it all would have fallen apart. But because of the patience to just wait, you were able to wait it out and then consummate the deal and result in the arrest. And most importantly, again, the getting back the Rembrandt. What did that feel like for you to be looking at this original self-portrait of a Rembrandt with the shadows and to be so close to it? What did it feel like when you saw the velvet wrap unfold and you saw that mastery up close?
Yeah. Interestingly enough, you say about the patience and all the cases, I had done this in maybe half a dozen to a dozen countries. And by 2005, and in every case, it's all about patience. That's the greatest virtue of an investigator or an undercover agent. It's to set out the trap, set out the lead, and put it out there and just wait and let the greed nibble, because that's what happens. The greed overcomes, any kind of suspicion. And in the end, it's patience. Always sit back and be the patient one. It'll come to you. So that's what I've always found in working undercover. As far as the feelings, I got to tell you, it's like it's a eureka feeling, just for a couple of hours. It's like when, I don't know if you have any children, but I had 3 children and they were all born healthy and had done well. And that feeling you get when your child is born and everything's okay and they're healthy and the mother's good, you just walk around on air for about a week. I mean, that's how I felt. And in these situations, when I recovered a piece, it would be for a couple of hours. I'd walk around on air, not as long as my kids, but for a couple of hours, it felt the same way. And then after that, it's a huge letdown. Okay, there's a crash that happens. It happened to me. I don't know about anybody else, but as an undercover agent, when you catch a tiger by the tail like this, in a case, and it's tearing you all over the place, taking you everywhere, right? And you're following this tiger, you're holding on for dear life, and you're patient, and it happens. When it's over, it's over. And it's a crash. It's just, boom, you're down again. And you got to start all over again on the next case. So for a little while, it's a crash. It's like losing the what do you call it? The adrenaline. And the adrenaline goes away and you have that crash and then you have to restart. And so you do that. But it's a great feeling.